but we've got Jaina here. So Jaina, if you want, go ahead and provide a self-intro and then fire up your PowerPoint. Thank you so much.
All right, well, thank you everybody for having me here today. My name is Jaina Moan, and I am the External Affairs Director for the Nature Conservancy in Nevada, and I'm based out of Las Vegas. Again, I really appreciate being here today. Today I'm going to be talking about our Mining the Sun initiative in Nevada, where our goal is to make it easier to site renewable energy on minelands and brownfields instead of on undeveloped lands that are important for wildlife and open space. And just real quick, I want to make sure that everybody can see my screen.
Yes, ma'am. Sure
Great.
can. Looks
Okay.
great.
Then I'll go ahead and advance the screen here. Before I start into our program, I want to just give you a little bit of information about the Nature Conservancy. We are a global NGO whose mission is to conserve the lands and waters on which all life depends. We are a science-based organization. About 25% of our staff are scientists, and we use a collaborative, solutions-oriented approach to conservation. TNC also has a broad reach. We have chapters in all 50 states, and we have conservation programs in 70 countries and territories across the world, including in Africa, Australia, Latin America, and Europe. And our global reach is important for our Mining the Sun program, because while we are focused on this here in Nevada now, we think there is opportunity to scale it up around the world. We often get the question, why is the Nature Conservancy involved in energy and infrastructure issues? And the answer is climate change. Tackling climate change is a critical component to the success of our mission. We also know that we can't solve climate change without addressing energy and land use issues. We recognize that we will need at least 10 times the amount of renewable development that we currently have to meet the needs of a decarbonized future, and this will require more land. So we know there's going to be more renewable energy development in the years to come, and we want to figure out the best place to put it, since it will require more land. We think that the best locations from a conservation perspective are on lands that have been previously disturbed. Mining operations, whether those in development, active, nearing closure, or already closed and abandoned mine lands, are good places because the land has already been utilized and there's infrastructure. So our goal with Mining the Sun initiative is to help make this type of development easier to happen on mine lands and brownfields. It's a good alternative to greenfield development. It can give old mines and brownfields new life, and it can also provide economic development opportunities for communities. This isn't a new idea. The EPA has been working for over a decade on their repowering program, and they've estimated in a preliminary estimate that there's potentially 6.7 million acres of minelands and brownfields that could support renewable development across the US. And according to EPA estimates, approximately 1 million of these acres are located in Nevada. Nevada communities have also thought about this type of development for a long time too. Lander County Economic Development Authority, for example, explored the feasibility of developing on mine sites about 10 years ago. And although there is this data and this interest out there, it's just not happening in Nevada, or it's happening in some other states, but it's not happening in Nevada to the extent that we want it to be. And so we sought to understand why, and we also sought out to stimulate how we can make this type of development happen. So to understand the legal and regulatory barriers for advancing renewable development on brownfields and mine lands, in 2018, the Conservancy commissioned a study from the University of Virginia's Environmental and Regulatory Law Clinic. And we learned that one of the major issues was that renewable energy development and storage was not officially recognized as a valid post-productive use of mine lands in the state of Nevada. And so to fix this, the Conservancy worked with the Nevada Mining Association to advocate for a change to the Nevada Administrative Code that would allow renewable development and storage as an allowable post-productive mining use of the land. This seemingly small change was made in 2018, and it has been an important one for advancing efforts to site renewable energy on mine lands. The work also generated positive media hits, including a tweet from our governor at the time, Governor Sandoval. We've also worked to, after achieving that regulatory change, we were pretty stoked about it. And what we wanted to do then was, in our conversations with policymakers and decision makers, they said, well, where are these sites in Nevada? What is the opportunity that we're talking about for renewable energy? So we worked to better define that opportunity by creating a map tool to visualize the solar, wind, and geothermal potential on all sites in Nevada. With funding from Barrick Gold Mines, the Nature Conservancy partnered with the Rocky Mountain Institute in Boulder, Colorado. We compiled data sets for this online mapper, and the data came from EPA repowering database and from Nevada state agencies, we just combined these several different data layers from different agencies into this site, and then we overlaid it with renewable energy data from the National Renewable Energy Lab. So you see on the screen a few screenshots from that map. The left map with colorful circles demonstrates both wind and solar energy potential of each brownfield or mineland site on the map. Wind energy potential is recognized and represented by the size of the circle, and solar energy is represented by the color of the circle. So the larger the size of the circle, the greater the wind energy potential at that particular site. And the same for the solar energy. The more red the circle, the greater the solar potential is at that site. And then we also looked at geothermal favorability. So on the right map, each dot on that right map represents a geothermal favorability of each mineland and brownfield sites, with the darker circles representing higher geothermal favorability. This image also has a transmission layer visible. We've included layers on the map for transmission, for substations, power plants, and also there's a layer that indicates site ownership. As many of you know, Nevada has 86% federal land, and so the land ownership of these sites is really important to consider when you're thinking about where renewable energy could go. And then finally, this map tool is available on ArcGIS, and it can be used to inform development opportunity by providing information about each site. So you can click on each point on the map and it will bring up a screen with more information about each site. And then we also have a measurement tool that can assess approximate distance of each site to nearest transmission. To further advance our Mining the Sun concept or initiative, we've also are working to advance pilot projects, and we've had several promising conversations with interested mines across the state. We've also been working with the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection, and the Abandoned Mine Lands Bureau has identified a handful of sites that can hold promise for potential renewable development, and those are represented on this map by the four push pins, the four yellow push pins. Starting in very eastern Nevada at the Castleton site. This is a site in Lincoln County, Nevada, near Pioche. It has a mill area and some tailings. And the parcel is owned by the Greenfield Multi-State Trust. It's about 55 acres, but there could be potential on this site actually for larger parcel availability. Some of the surrounding parcels are owned by Lincoln County and other private property owners. Another site that the NDEP really highlighted for us over here near Yerington is the Buckskin Pruitt site in Lyon County. The land ownership at this site is mixed private and BLM, and it's also seen, though, I think one of the reasons why this is a low-hanging fruit is because it has a relatively low cost to remediate. A pilot characterization study anticipated that remediation could occur within a year. There is electricity infrastructure on site and nearby, and that is really beneficial for when you're thinking about putting renewable energy on site. And you'll see that with some of these other sites too. When I was talking to NDEP about abandoned mine lands and including them on our map, we had a conversation about it. And I know a lot of abandoned mine lands are historic sites. And so I essentially gave NDEP a list of the qualities that I was thinking about, like electricity infrastructure and proximity to transmission. And they have come back and told me that these are good sites. And so we're working to dive a little bit deeper into what it would take to actually turn these sites into renewable developments once they're remediated. And then I will also add too, like we've been sharing this Mining the Sun map tool with several audiences for the past year now, and it really has led to a lot of good suggestions. So people will just come to me and they will, or they'll call me and they'll say, you know, I used your map and I found a site that I think could be ideal. And I just want to put a little plug in there for if you are out at a mineland site or an abandoned mineland site and you think it could be suitable for renewable development, please don't hesitate to call me, because a lot of the sites in our pilot projects that we are actively working on right now just came from tips like that. Another thing that we have been doing is connecting renewable development companies to mines who are interested in developing projects. This slide is from a company called SunPower, and it describes a step-by-step process for a renewable energy project. So starting with project feasibility, followed by site control and due diligence steps, an off-taker for the energy needs to be identified. And I'll just note here that if this is an operating mine, it can be its own off-taker using the power for its own operations. Interconnection needs to be established for off-site off-takers, and then the design and engineering aspects can be finalized. Once permitting is secured, the project can move forward with procurement of contractors, construction, and financing. And finally, an operations, maintenance, and asset management plan is completed. This process from feasibility to final commercial operation can take 12 months to several years, really depends on the permitting and the players at the different steps. Project feasibility is the first step, and this company, SunPower, offers no cost, no obligation project feasibility assessments, and so we've been really grateful to them. We've been able to connect them with several landowners and several mines who are interested in developing renewable energy. And so for these next two slides, I just touch on a little bit of considerations that landowners who have abandoned mine lands on their properties or mines themselves can consider as they are getting started with renewable development on their site. And the first thing is the land considerations. Are there closed waste rock dump sites or tailing sites available? How many acres are available on the site? We use a calculation from the NREL, from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. That's 5 to 7 megawatts per acre is approximately how many megawatts you can get from 1 acre. And so we appreciate having that number, because it allows us to easily take the amount of acres available to provide a really ballpark estimate of how much renewable energy or solar could go on that site. It's really solar is 5 to 7 megawatts per acre. It changes per technology. So if you have wind or geothermal, that calculation will be different. Are there sites available after the mine closes if the mine is still operating? And what's the timing of that? Frequently we see that we think we could get renewable energy established at a mine site, and then when it closes, tailing sites are usually more available and they're a larger land area to support larger amounts of electricity. And then finally, what's the condition of the land area? Is there a particular substrate that's difficult to install posts into? Is there remediation required? Electricity is a really important part of the equation. And so when mines or landowners are looking to put renewable energy on site, they should also be prepared to provide a line drawing of electric distribution and be able to answer questions about consumption and cost. And typically what the renewable developer will ask for is just a power bill so that they can calculate this. Of course, if the land is closed, then there's probably no power bill available, and that needs to be done. Also, reclamation is another interesting thing that we've been looking at. And the question that we've had there is, what are the reclamation requirements? Are they changed? Frequently, reclamation requires removal of all electricity infrastructure. But in the case of where you want to put electricity infrastructure back on top of that, can that savings in reclamation that would cost you to remove that infrastructure, can that actually calculate into a savings for deferred reclamation? And so we think that these are some ways that it can make these projects a little bit more cost effective. And I'll just also add that I'm happy to connect anybody who's interested to SunPower. They're responsible and they're diligent, and they do follow up and provide some good cost estimates. While we believe there are pathways forward for renewable energy development on mine lands and brownfields, we would be remiss if I did not discuss the barriers associated with development. So first, and probably foremost, are the financial challenges. The cost to develop on previously disturbed lands can be high, and financing these projects is complicated. There is perceived or actual liability depending on the type of site. Is it possible the reclamation burden does not disappear and it could be passed on to the next land user? There's, again, questions about transmission and infrastructure, permitting challenges, and I know that permitting delays can be a deterrent as mines and landowners need to revise permits to support another use, which is renewable energy. And then there's still much to learn about where ideal sites are for development and the timing of land availability. And then finally, identifying off-takers can be a challenge. It can be difficult to find electricity buyers and coordinate with the various entities in the electricity market. But we know these barriers exist. We also know that it is possible, with careful planning, to achieve both conservation of natural and working lands and expand our renewable generation portfolio. And there are opportunities with Nevada's plans for climate action. The Nevada Climate Strategy, published in December 2020, highlighted the need for smart from the start renewable energy planning. It also called out the role that reclaimed mining lands can play in siting renewable energy. Furthermore, when it comes to electricity, Nevada sits at a crossroads among the Western states. For the past several years, Nevada leaders have turned their sights to Nevada's position as a path to bring renewable energy from wind and solar developments in the Mountain West states to energy markets along the coast. The past couple of years have seen dialogue among policymakers about Nevada's role in electricity markets and in the Western interconnection. And recently, NV Energy has proposed a $2 billion transmission project, which is Greenlink Nevada. At the Conservancy, we think there's an opportunity to take these transmission plans and have a conversation about smart planning and siting on mine lands and brownfields. I'll just note that there are numerous mine lands and brownfields located along these proposed transmission routes, and that red transmission route that you see is already operational. There's certainly many abandoned mine lands and perhaps many opportunities to link into these transmission lines that are being planned. So to close out this presentation, I just want to offer a broader perspective of our vision for how mines can fit, not just into a clean energy economy, but also a framework of siting renewable energy on mine sites can lead to broader economic opportunities for mines beyond the life of the mine. So at the Conservancy, we've been exploring how we can co-locate carbon capture storage technologies with renewable generation at mine sites. We think there's a huge opportunity there. And this next series of slides was created by my colleague, John Zablocki. He's the Energy and Infrastructure Strategy Lead for Nevada at the Nature Conservancy. And I just want to walk you through some of these sites to just give you a little bit of an idea of how we can rethink this mining the sun model over the life cycle of a mining operation. So our current model of mining closure is really the mine finishes its useful life, it's extracted everything it needs to, it has a closure plan, and then it moves into reclamation, typically with ongoing liabilities for the mine site. In a paradigm shift, if we can kind of think instead about closing that mine and instead thinking of it as transitioning the mine or the formal industrial site or the brownfield, but transition it to another use instead of ending it. And so instead of a post-mining closure, well, you still have a mine closure potentially, but you have new industries that can be sited on there, maybe direct air carbon capture and storage, maybe renewable energy production, recycling, materials processing, energy export. I think it's a different thinking of planning, going from closing a site to planning and thinking about how to transition a site. And so we call this the diamonds in the sky model of the mining industry. And diamonds in the sky, because if we think about carbon reduction and we think about direct air carbon capture and pulling that in and making something useful out of that carbon that we pull from the atmosphere, one of the basest forms of carbon, purest form of carbon is diamond. And so we can literally make diamonds from the sky, but there's many other applications that we can think about with this. We envision something of a closure where the utility and mining operation partner to make an upfront investment in the transmission infrastructure, upgrade it to enable two-way power flow between the mine and the grid, so that the mine and the utility are both able to receive and export power to and from the site. The mining operation, if its useful life is ended, it could move into closure, but rather than reclaiming the site in the traditional way we think about it, what about if we transition that energy infrastructure to a new form of industrial use that produces an economic benefit from that power? And again, some of those examples include ones that I've already stated, like recycling, manufacturing, energy storage. In this model, we really see this as being the utility then can access the power that is being generated on site when it is needed under an agreement with the industry. It would enable renewable power to always be available for the grid system, but then it would also save the utility the problem of overbuild and curtailment, because the power could be put towards a different economic use, direct air carbon capture, hydrogen fuel production, perhaps. But this power can be used when it's not needed from the grid, so it's never wasted. It's an idea. It's something that we think there's lots of opportunity for, and we think it's something worth exploring. It really makes this mining the sun equation be thought of at all stages: operation, exploration, planning, closure, and post-mining. If the mining companies themselves are not interested in transitioning the site to a new form of post-mining industry, it would be worth, we think, them exploring what other business partners might be able to generate co-benefits. There are ways of turning liabilities into revenues. It's just a question of who does it. So that's why we think it's really helpful if we explore the co-benefits of these sites. The industry should actively engage with the utility industry on long-term infrastructure planning, because we think this is also a key determinant of site viability. It also makes sense to plan transmission infrastructure to utilize these sites beyond their planned lifetime. And then finally, to move this forward, we've most recently been talking with members of Congress about mining the sun to advance the siting of renewable energy on mine lands and brownfields. We've been talking with Senator Jackie Rosen about a proposed redeveloped act that would codify the EPA repowering program. And then we also think there's a lot of opportunity in the American Jobs Plan for putting more investment into this type of energy infrastructure. President Biden's plan allocated $5 billion for cleaning up Superfund sites and brownfields, but there was no mention of renewable energy. So we plan to work with our senators to try to change that equation to see if we can realize those co-benefits on those mining sites. And then, I've presented about this to a number of different forums, and I feel like there's so much interest about mining the sun, and people always ask me, well, what can we do? How can we help? And if you think about it, we would love to help foster a dialogue between industry and other stakeholder groups. Everybody can play a role in that. If you have any suggestions for pilot or demo projects, please let me know, because we can connect those folks with our connections at the renewable energy companies, and we can get at least a feasibility assessment done so that we know how much it would cost if renewable energy is of interest. And then I think it's really important in energy conversations, for folks to express their support of this. You know, we're hearing more and more about how more renewable energy is going to be built. We're seeing it being built on just large undeveloped tracts of public lands. And those public lands are really important for animal species and plant species. And we really just want to see more development happen on mine lands and brownfields, on the places that we've already developed for an economic purpose. And so if you hear in energy conversations about renewable energy and siting, we found that it's really effective if more and more people are saying, can we please build on mine lands? Can we please build on brownfields? And this could be done with quotes, letters, media, contacting policymakers. We would love more support in this regard. And with that, I will say thank you. And I very much appreciate your time and attention. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jaina. That was great. That was really informative and so good to see the Nature Conservancy working in this capacity. Seems that we've wrestled with what co-use and reuse and extended use of mine sites for a number of years. So it's great to see a new partner in the field trying to make that happen. There are a couple of questions. Tom Crawford wanted to say, well, he said, really interesting work. What's the URL for accessing the map tool?
All right, I'll drop that in the chat.
Okay. And then Matt Bailings, is there an opportunity for the Nature Conservancy or various municipalities within the state of Nevada to make use of the funds coming to the state through the American Rescue Plan Act to implement some of these renewable projects that may otherwise be economically challenging?
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. And that is a great thought. And that's what we were thinking about. You might have typed that question before I had answered it with my federal legislation slide, but I know Senator Cortez Masto is really interested in looking at the American Jobs Act and seeing how we can incentivize this type of development. And absolutely, I think it's there. So that's another great suggestion. We have the Nature Conservancy has prepared a long list of recommendations for recovery funding, and this is certainly on one of them. That's on there. So thank you.
Yeah, and then I'll throw the question out to you on reclamation. You and I have had a couple of conversations on this front. From a mining perspective, we need to close a site. That's part of the reclamation aspect. And closure would still, with renewable energy reuse, if you will, still be a part of the equation. You'd still have to, at some point, we're going to go on to another technology that will generate our power for us, and hopefully in a different format, right? So the closure of that site would still need to maintain the complete removal of all infrastructure, if you will. Has your renewable energy partners, have they contemplated that? What's the cost to incur that, to ensure that we have a bond in place? And then I think we know renewable energy on the solar side, at least, and I think it's somewhat similar on wind, has about a 15 to 20, maybe 25-year life, and then you got to cycle it out and go for another technology, whatever will be new down the road in 25 years. Do any of your developments contemplate that as well?
Absolutely. I think that reclamation is, we started this work thinking that it could be beneficial for reclamation savings. And I realized that there is requirements now for removal of electricity infrastructure, and that the reclamation burden just passes to another user. So does it really save anything in reclamation? And these are all very good questions that we haven't found the exact answer to. I do think that perhaps there is a conversation to be had about what does reclaiming a mine site mean if it's going to be transitioned to another use, and then for that next use that it is, what does reclamation mean for that user? What does it mean? What does reclamation mean for a renewable energy developer? And so I think these are all questions that have come up, and I would put them and slot them into the barriers and challenges category that we continuously work with. And the way that we've approached it with some of the mines that have expressed interest is really looking at a reclamation cost savings for what could be saved if renewable energy were to go on that site. And it differs for every site.
Yeah, that's assuming your renewable energy in perpetuity, right? But at some point that technology will fail, if you will, or at least wear itself out, and something would have to happen with that infrastructure.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. So I don't see any other questions, and we're still five minutes ahead of the schedule. So I appreciate everybody so far and keeping us on track, especially with our beginnings. But I'm going to turn it over now to Jim Gusek,